Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in a RISE analyst, Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Constance.
Good morning, Yolanda. How was your weekend?
Fine, thanks. And yours?
Very bright and yellow today.
Oh, yes.
And Charles, how are you today?
Good morning, Constance.
Good morning.
I am trying to be as fine as I can be, and you and colors.
You are fine, don't worry. You're a handsome man. Okay, to look at the papers with us this morning, we have Dr. Iyobosa Owogarian. He is the editor, Nation's Capital, of This Day. And we'll begin with the paper that he reviews. In This Day today, NUPRC, Nigeria winning war against illegal bunkering, oil theft reduced to 5,000 barrels per day. Efforts by the federal government to ramp up crude production is yielding results, and this is seen as a major boost to the 2025 budget, as Nigeria aims to produce 2.06 barrels per day of crude oil at a price of $75 per barrel. The country hopes to reduce deficit financing in the over 54 trillion naira budget. Dr. Yoba, so when you look at the story, I mean, crude oil theft has been a long-standing issue in Nigeria. From this report, we see that there has been significant progress made fighting this problem. From over 108,000 barrels per day theft, we now have just 5,000 barrels per day. Although it's not just 5,000, is still a lot, but we've moved the needle here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm not surprised that they are celebrating it. If you look at where we are coming from, about a few months ago, it was almost about 108 barrels per day that we're losing to these bunkers. And just about 2 weeks ago, it got to about 15,000 barrels per day. But today, they are saying that it is now 5,000. 5,000 is still huge if you look at the amount that 5,000 will amount to. But I want to commend the effort of the security agencies and the NNPC for being able to reduce this, because whether we like it or not, oil accounts for about 80% of our exports, and it is also crucial to the implementations of this year's budget. With this, we are sure that we'll get more money. Like they said, their target is to increase the barrel per day to about 2.2 million barrels per day. And I'm sure with the combined effort of the security agencies and the NNPC, with the effort they are putting in place, I'm sure that will be achieved in no distant time.
Yeah, as at Q1 2022, production was down to 1 million barrels per day. Now we've moved it up to 2.06% barrels per day. So, you know, that's an increase. Do you want to quickly also look at this other story in This Day, if we can pull up This Day again? Amid mounting opposition, Matawalle affirms not support for Tinubu. Bello Matawalle is the Minister of State for Defense, and we know that this story has been on for at least a week. You know, comments from Malam Nasir El-Rufai and former Secretary to the government, Babachio Lawal, talking about opposition to President Bola Tinubu. But now the Minister of State for Defense is coming coming out strongly in support of the president.
Well, El-Rufai and the former SGF were the aggrieved politicians. They were with Tinubu during the election, and unfortunately they lost out. So the fact that they are mounting pressure on Tinubu is not surprise to many Nigerians. Matawalle, yes, is raising some issues. What do you expect of him? He's an appointee of the current president. But having said that, I think from what he said, many people might want to agree with him, but the opposition might want to kick. He talked about the improvement in security. I think if you also look at the statistics, the data we have today, we have improved in terms of security management. In infrastructure, I think the government is also doing very well, especially in the Federal Capital Territory. So if you look at all these things, taking into consideration what Matawalle said yesterday, you might not disagree with him to some extent. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Vanguard newspaper. Trump's energy policy, FG's 19.6 trillion revenue target under threat. That's 19.6 trillion naira. Diaspora remittances for its budget will be impacted. Let's also look at Daily Trust. There's another story that is on the same topic here. In Daily Trust 2025 budget, how U.S. aid withdrawal triggered 300 billion naira allocation for drugs others. This was sequel to the suspension by the U.S. government of interventions in Nigeria's health sector through provisions of vaccines, drugs for malaria, polio, HIV, and tuberculosis using the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. Based on this, the president made a new provision for funding in the service-wide votes. It means that we can find money for, to fund our own projects when push comes to shove, Charles. From what we're seeing here, we're beginning to eliminate waste, or we have to eliminate waste in order to look for funding to cover these shortfalls.
I'll go for we need to eliminate waste option, and that speaks so much about our economy being dependent on so many external and extraneous factors. Apparently, the budget was crafted based on so many factors that we are not in control of, particularly the aid that comes from the United States, and particularly Donald Trump's policies that have shaken the world in so many ways. So yes, it means that we have to think outside the box. We have to be a bit more innovative, and we have to be also sincere, because most of the time the gains of policies that are meant to improve Nigeria's economy are usually not realized because of endemic corruption. So this time around, apart from thinking outside of the box and being innovative, we need to be also sincere and honest. Otherwise, the projections look pretty dire.
Well, I think it's across the world. Trump is cutting out a lot of funding for several projects abroad. So I think many countries within the African continent are beginning to adjust. Let's look at New Telegraph. Proposed ban of fuel tankers will cost over 300 billion naira. NATO blames bad roads, driver-related factors for rising cases of accidents. NATO is the Nigerian Association of Road Transport Owners, and they are about to be hit hard with the government's proposed ban on 60,000-litre capacity trucks from federal highways. This follows the increase in number of deaths resulting from petrol tanker incidents, which has led to 493 deaths in 3 years. Part of the recommendation for reducing fatalities from petrol tanker accidents is to reduce or restrict them to a maximum of 45,000 liters. I mean, Dr. Yubo said there's a lot of contention over what this means for these petrol tanker drivers, but something needs to be done, because over the past couple of years there has been a lot of accidents and they tend to get away with it. So that's what the federal government is trying to solve, a problem on our roads.
Well, if you look at the problem of this tanker on the roads, but I hope the federal government is planning an alternative. If you are planning to ban tankers, I'm sure they will provide an alternative. But having said that, I think the federal government is not addressing the real issues. There's something wrong with fuel tankers plying our road. But I think the major problem is the highway. The roads are very bad. So rather than planning to ban tankers, I think all we need to do is to make effort to fix our road. If the roads are good, this accident will reduce. It is not just only the fuel tanker. We have so many accidents almost on a daily basis in our highway because of the bad road. So rather than trying to look at the symptom, I think we should look at the root cause of the matter and see how we can address them. And also, I think, like somebody suggested, the drivers also need to be trained, being enlightened about the way they drive. And more so, the road safety agencies should be on the road, on the highway, to ensure that this driver comply with the driving rules and regulation. Rather than planning to ban the fuel tanker, I think we should address the main cause of the accident on our highway. And the main cause is the bad road across the country.
All right, Yolanda, you go first.
All right. Thank you, Charles.
Remember, he's in the overflow, so.
Right,
kind of,
okay.
Sorry.
So I want to add on to that, it's also the rules and that regulate all of these, you know, things. I don't think it's just a matter of banning these tankers. I think we have ill-experienced drivers. That's one. We need to look into that. We need to look into the time that these tankers are on the road. They cannot be on the road 24/7 whenever they wish. It should be at a time where there are, you know, less people on the road, like in the middle of the night. Well, that's how it is abroad. And I'd expect that that same thing would be emulated here as well to make it easier for, you know, people to get around. And as well, on the situation of the roads, I think that is also, as was mentioned by our analyst, that is also something that needs to be looked at. There are many things that need to be looked into.
Absolutely.
And it's not just a matter of banning these tankers. There have to be some solutions along the way.
What
Chelsea,
about the
we're going
state
to-
of the vehicles themselves?
Absolutely.
The state of the vehicles themselves.
Initially, I thought it was going to be an outright ban on tankers. So I was wondering, okay, so are we bringing back the trains like it used to be way back then before we started bridging this thing? Or are we going back to, you know, the underground pipelines that are almost always being compromised? But anyway, they said they were reducing they were banning the 60,000 liter tankers and reducing the maximum capacity to the 45,000 liter tankers. And I'm asking, okay, so what difference does it make
Right.
if the drivers continue to be reckless?
Right.
If the roads are still bad, then of course we may later have to reduce the capacity to 30,000
Okay.
liters. So those are the factors Yolanda outlined should definitely be looked into. Some of these tanker drivers are absolutely careless. Anytime I have to overtake
Reckless.
a tanker,
Yes.
Okay.
or anytime I have to drive behind one, my heart is
You have
always
to
in
say
my
a little
mouth.
prayer, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's see Punch newspaper. Telecoms tariff hike. FG deploys security agents as NLC insists on protest. The Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps yesterday won the Nigeria Labour Congress against the planned March 1 shutdown of telecom services in response to the 50% tariff hike. Security agencies have been deployed to base stations, and they said this protest may pose a risk to national security and public safety. Dr. Yubosa, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, one may understand where the Nigeria Labour Congress is coming from, especially in the last few months. Nigerians have been burdened with so many tariffs, you know. But having said that, but I think the proposed protest, if you ask me, is unnecessary. Whether we like it or not, the telecommunications are also operating within the harsh economic environment that has been created by the federal government policies and program. You know, it's not just Nigerians that are affected. Even businesses, business organizations that are doing business in Nigeria are also affected by this harsh economic policy. The executive vice chairman of the NCC told us some time ago that on the weekly basis, the telecommunications spend almost about 400 million liters of diesel to power their stations. And if you multiply that by 1,100 naira per liters of diesel, you are talking about spending almost about 400 million naira every week to power the stations. So where did you expect them to get that money from? So I think the NSC, rather than confronting the telecommunication, should begin to, you know, engage the federal government on how they can create the enabling business environment for everybody to do business in Nigeria, rather than confronting the telecommunications. If you ask me, the strike is unnecessary, and I think they should find a way to engage the telecommunications and the federal government on this matter.
Well, we'll see. Daily Sun, let's look quickly at other papers. Daily Sun, PDP sinks deeper, opposition party crisis worsens as plot against Wabara BOT thickens. We also have crisis brews at Marine Ministry as parastatal heads allegedly undermine Oyetola. Fundraising, Enugu Security Trust Fund rakes 3 billion naira. And at the top there we have Nnamdi Kanu's abduction by Nigeria is criminal, according to Nwodo. Then moving on to Daily Independent, 28.1 trillion fiscal deficit, debt servicing burden may dwarf performance. Serap gives CBN 48 hours to withdraw ATM fee hike. I don't know if that will go anywhere. We also have Tinubu urges joint maritime task force to boost Gulf of Guinea security. And on to, we have The Guardian. Despite 7.2 trillion naira subsidies, power sector inefficiencies take toll on consumers. And court rejects families' bid for interim administrator of Wigwe's estate, and U.S. policy shifts leaves AGOA diaspora remittances hanging. And then on to the international headlines. We have Daily Graphic this morning. Africa must be self-reliant on financing development, according to President Mahama. He was speaking at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And in that photo, we can see him in a handshake with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. I mean, you learn that it's about time. President Mahama is saying what a lot of people have been discussing over the past 1 week in response to President Trump's decision to cut funding to a lot of countries.
Yes, it brings me a great deal of satisfaction to hear these types of conversations going about, because just as the headline says, Africa must be self-reliant. It's a must. There's no two-way about it. I think as well, these talks with what has been happening with Trump has also been a little bit embarrassing on us, that in this day and age, Africa, with the amount of resources that we have, natural resources that we have, we cannot continue to be dependent on the West to be giving us handouts, and as well giving with one hand and taking with the other. I think it's time, and I'm glad that these conversations are starting to make the light of day.
And you know, the AU has a role to play as well,
yes,
you know, helping countries to mobilize domestic funding and resources within the continent. Because as you said, these Western countries, yes, they give aid, but they're also exploiting the countries or the continent. So you have to work towards stopping, you know, reducing that exploitation, which gives you the room to produce and to generate the revenue that you need to run your countries. You know, so we'll see how that goes. Citizen newspaper, U.S. refugee, not that easy. Experts are telling us. They want to take up U.S. President Donald Trump's refugee offer. It's not easy. It could take months getting together a stream of papers, such as certified police clearance, among other things. Then you have to wait for years in order to get this refugee status. This is what they are telling us as past. It's because of the standoff between South Africa and the U.S. You know, it has worsened, and you have 4 Republicans that are actually written a letter to President Donald Trump, labeling the South African government as an ethno-nationalist gangster regime. You know, that's strong words, Yolanda.
Yes, and I think, you know, it's a system that not many, unless you've been in the system, you would know. But if you've never been in the system, it's not easy. You know very well that the challenges that are faced with you know, being a refugee in the U.S. are pretty complex. You know, it involves, you know, seeking asylum and then integration. There's a lot that is involved in all of that, and many refugees encounter difficulties as well with legal battles of different proportions, limited access to resources. So yes, I'm glad that this conversation is being had as well. Charles, you seem to say something.
There's also the fact that you know, many of the U.S., for instance, you know, is miffed at the audacity of South Africa approaching the International Criminal Court to bring the case of genocide against Israel. And so that's why we're also seeing that President Trump has sanctioned the International Criminal Court. You know, well, there's a lot of politics going on there. It
seems like he's just bullying here, as he usually does. This is what it feels like. It feels like he's just bullying.
Exactly. Let's look at Daily Mail also. Europe in turmoil. Starmer flies into a storm. Anger as PM rejects call for urgent boost to defense spending ahead of crisis summit in Paris today. And a showdown with Trump. The kernel of the story is that the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is not eager to raise the 2.5% 5% GDP spending on the armed forces. All this is happening after the Watershed Security Summit in Munich, where President Donald Trump warned Europe to stop relying on America for its security. Dr. Yebosa, at this point, Europe does not have more choice but to also increase their defense spending. They've been trying to increase that over the past couple of years. So there has to be more contributions from different countries.
Yeah, I agree with you, but if you look at it, the Europe is also in crisis, especially when Donald Trump has initiated a peace talk, among the world-ready countries like the Ukraine and Russia and the Gaza war and all that. So I'm sure in the next, is it today or tomorrow?
It's today.
It's today, yeah.
The summit is today.
Yeah, today is summit. And so I think the Donald Trump move, if you ask me, in spite of his grandstanding, is the way to go. We need to find a way to end war in those countries. I'm talking of Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, and Gaza. We should find a way to end that war because the war has cost the entire world a huge amount of resources. Many lives had been lost, So it is senseless, to continue with the war, if you ask me.
Trump is actually working towards enforcing, because that's the way I see it, enforcing peace between Ukraine and Russia.
Russia, yeah.
The European powers, on the other hand, are trying to find a way to ensure that Ukraine wins, so to say, the war. I mean, let the war end in Ukraine's favor so that it will strengthen the position of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, because they look at it from the point of view that if the war ends in favor of Russia, then the rest of Europe is under threat. Let's not forget that the European military powers are led by Britain and France, Germany, and I think Spain, and they also are on the edge at the moment. And that's why, we have that headline, Stormer flying into a storm, because Britain, as the military leader of Europe, feels really, really jittery. So it will do all it can, but then it's bringing two traditional allies, Britain and the U.S., at loggerheads. Okay. And I wonder what that portends for future relations as far as military cooperation is concerned.
And I think that's also why the negotiations are going on in Saudi Arabia between the U.S. and Russia, and Ukraine is not on the table there. So a lot of going on. Well, that's much that we can take on the paper review today. Dr. Yebosa Owogiaran, editor at the nation's capital of this day newspaper, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Dr. Constance, for the incisive review of the papers. That's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Charles Eruka. It's goodbye from me.
I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.